Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Locke and Key Season 2, Episode 4. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, we are picking up with the Duncan situation. Obviously, Duncan remembers, a memory of him and Rendell and him using a ghost key, but from his mind, it's just oh, I died here, but it's just a lot to process because it is the thing of, because I think it might be the fact is because the Forget-Me-Not, not the Forget-Me-Not, because that's the name of the episode, which makes me think of Halloween Town. I don't know if these came up in the movie, but I knew they came up in Kingdom Hearts. That was an ingredient to try and make a heart of Forget-Me-Nots. It's a whole thing. But the memory key. They never used it on Duncan because he made the memory key, but they made sure to take his memories out. So that's why it's affected. If the memory key was used on him beforehand, because that's how they took his memories out in the first place, isn't it? The memory key. Because they could have just used the head key. I don't know. What key did they use to get his memories out? Did they use the head key to do that? Or did they use the memory key to do that? Because they used the memory key to make sure that they can keep their memories, but maybe that's how they took his... No, I think they just used the head key, because the head key is how you get in people's head and just move memories out anyway. So it's probably because it would explain why it's affecting him the way it is because, and why Aaron didn't have the same issue, is because the memory key was used on her to not forget, so her mind can compensate for it, whereas Duncan, all those memories were taken out and he never had the memory key adapted to him. So maybe the transition would be a little bit better if the memory key had been used on him first. And like I said, if I'm understanding this right, I could be completely misunderstanding, but I think they used the head key to get his memories, but maybe the memory key played a role in that. We know he made the memory key before they took his memories out, so cause we saw what key was in his net, but I don't remember looking. I didn't catch the handle of the key, so I couldn't tell whether it was the head key or the memory key. It might have just straight up been the memory key, but yeah, it is that thing of adults aren't supposed to remember magic, and it's taking its toll on his mind, trying to remember. It's he's remembering pieces. Even at one point, he's down there in the basement, and he remembers Rendell killing Lucas, but he can't make sense of it. Everything's fragmented. He's only remember pieces to it, and the more he's remembering, the more it's making him stumble. Even to the point he's yelling at Bodhi later on. He's just get out, you're not real. But it's because he saw a younger version of himself. He wasn't even seeing Bodhi. It's the lines between what's real and what isn't, it's just blurring for him right now, and that's a very bad and dangerous thing. Even to one point, we see him drawing at one point, and I think that's probably him trying to draw his memories. He's trying to get them out, whether it's verbally or just in the drawing. He just needs, because it's all flooding at once, and it's not in a continuous sequence of this memory. It's all over the place, because everything in Key House is triggering everything all at once. The questions and everything are triggering everything inside of him. So now they all have to figure out, now that we kind of, as Bowden put it, we broke Uncle Duncan. It's so what do we do? It's yeah, he's worse and even getting worse, to the point Kenzie's even saying later on, we might need to just go doing what we did was probably the worst decision, because we probably need to just go in there and take those memories out of Duncan, because us leaving him like that is just going to make matters worse, which Duncan did hold over, because they were the ghost key's ghost key, and he hands him over the Anywhere key, and he's where'd you even get this? But he doesn't remember. So it's yeah, he found it upstairs, yeah, but wasn't in the door with it, and not, because even Bodhi's did Dodge drop it when we fought her last season? But it's no, would she be careless enough to do that? Now the questions are starting to pile up about a lot of those inconsistencies, because once again, Kenzie and Scott already got into it about the fact is, I think this is after the Anywhere key popped up, but they don't know it ended up in Kenzie's room, and Kenzie's if she probably knew that it ended up in her room, it'd be wait, but that would explain why Scott got control. It would put pieces together, but she hasn't quite pieced it together yet, but I'll get to that soon enough. So finding out, they just where did he find the Anywhere key? Because a lot of the assumption might just be he found it or picked it up, or maybe he's had it this entire time and just didn't realize it. Because that's why they're asking him, when did he find the key? Was it sometime after Dodge had it? Whatever the case may be. So there's a lot of unanswered questions for them in that point. But like I was bringing up earlier, Kinsey and Scott got into it because Scott, he thinks something's going on between Gabe and Eden. It's like, yeah, something intimate, but they were like arguing with each other. But he was like, yeah, I was being controlled. And she's like, the music box was where I left it. Like, I asked my uncle to check on it. And he's like, well, I mean, who knows? It could have been another key like that. It, like, you know me. Like, Kinsey, he's like, the only rational explanation is like, Gabe's behind. She's like, what? It's like, well, yeah, but like, he started stuff with me, and it's like he wanted there to be a fight. She's like, yeah, but he defended you later on. He let it all pass. He's like, yeah, very charitable of him. Like, Scott's right on the trail because he's like, yeah, like, it's like, why? You think Gabe's jealous of you? He's like, yeah, he is. I mean, jealousy's partially it. It's mainly like he needs to keep Kinsey close, but there is an element of jealousy to it. So no matter what Scott's saying, she isn't listening, which even Scott's like, you aren't like seeing things clearly. You haven't seen things clearly since you took the stuff out of your head, that fear out of your head. And I think that's when the conversation shifted for Kinsey. Because the problem is, a lot of what Scott was saying were like a lot of insecurities Kinsey already had. Like, first and foremost, being like, how well do you know me? How well do you know Scott? How well do you know Gabe? And she's like, I've known you just as long. It's like, granted, you've known Scott longer, actually, but you've even admitted you've been in Scott's head. You haven't been in Gabe's. Now, that can be invasive and stuff like that, but that gives you access to, like, knowing someone on a different level and letting someone get to know you. Scott's let you get to know him. Gabe has only told you stuff about himself. So I think Scott bringing that up brought up her own insecurities because she has questioned Gabe before. And so now it makes her feel bad of like, yeah, like Scott bringing up stuff that she had questioned about, like, oh, like not really knowing Gabe like that. But also it's like, yeah, maybe you should go to that like school in Rochester. And he was just kind of like, okay, and just walks away. Because I don't know if he found out at that point or not. Because Abby brings it up at the party that Scott didn't get into the school. So he probably already knew back then when they had that argument. So that's probably why he was like, I mean, I think it's just like, right, Kinsey, you're not listening to me. You won't trust me. Like, we're supposed to be friends and everything. Like, we're something more. But it also speaks volumes. Like, her and Scott, like, she started liking Scott before she took the fear out of her. But then, like, obviously later on we'll get to it, like, she does put the fear back in her, and now she's starting to question everything. Because that was, like, she never really realized, like, just how much she was afraid of, just because it's, like, she's going around without fear for so long. But those fear makes her, yes, it makes you probably less likely to take chances, but I think that's the point, to, like, find a way to surmount your fear, not just completely remove it, because fear is fundamental to, like, right, like, your fear can keep you from doing something stupid. Like, she even says, like, she hasn't made the best choices since taking her fear out because she doesn't think about the consequences. She doesn't think things through. It's just kind of like, whatever, I have nothing to be afraid of, so she jumps at the opportunities to do anything. Like, so, like, she doesn't really fully think things through, even though it's, you know, it's like, I think it takes, you need a little bit of everything to make logical decisions, and even your fear of thinking, like, right, what could be that? What are the bad sides to the outcome? Whereas without fear, you're just like, who cares? I'm gonna do it. But with fear, you can think like, what's the bad side? What could happen? What could be aftermath? What could be the consequences? The fear of your brain could like add that to the logical decisions you make, or just decisions in general you make. So. And I think that just once again speaks volumes of she didn't really start liking Gabe fully until after she took out her fear. She still kept liking Scott, but Gabe just fed into those like, oh, she just did whatever. It's like, oh, it was nice. Gabe liked her for who she was. He was even playing into it. That was the point. He knew she didn't have her fear in her. And, well, I don't know if he knew that she didn't have her fear in her. Well, yes, because she did. Because when Lucas was Dodge, she saw Kinsey bearing her fear, so that's what made it advantageous to lean into it. So that's why like Gabe did all the stuff that like he knew that would force like go along with what Kinsey wanted, and like her without her fear would just kind of go along with it as well, and just kind of like, yeah, this is right. Like you're accepting me as me, whereas everyone else I'm getting a little bit of pushback, you know. So there's that, but since I did bring it up. The whole fear situation, I thought was interesting when Bodhi actually said, like, right, when you're inside your own head, you can control everything. So just because your fear is out of your head, maybe you can control it, which she tried to, but it didn't work. But it does pop up later on because her fear finally broke out of the cage. Now, whether it broke out of the cage and it just happened to find its way back to her, or like her trying to will it back to her drew its attention, either way, like, it wasn't until, like, Aaron and her were going out there examining the woods, I'm like, what could that be? And we saw a shadow walk run by. I was like, all right, her fear. I was like, I had no idea what could have been. It didn't even cross my mind to think it could have been her fear, but it goes back to where it belongs. And she immediately, the effects kind of taken back immediately. Like I said, she talks to Aaron about, like, not realizing just how much she was afraid of, like, everything, you know? So you have Aaron still trying to repair things with Duncan, wanting the head key so she could do something, which we'll circle to that later. But her and Nina got to talking, and I thought that was really interesting, where obviously it's like her looking at it. Obviously she was looking for the memory key, but she had to be like, oh, I'm looking for a book, and then she sees a picture. It's like, oh man, it's weird. She's like, oh, to see Randall older? She's like, oh yes, but him with a beard, like he didn't have to start shaving until senior year. But she talks about the fact is that because Nina, like, because she was like, oh, I don't want to talk about it if you don't want to. She's like, no, I like to, because that was the whole point of coming here, was like to learn more about Rendell, and Aaron could give her a lot of those answers that Ellie wasn't quite willing to give her. I mean, to be fair, like, Aaron, out of anybody in that group other than Duncan, was pretty close to Rendell. They were dating at the time, but she's able to talk about the fact that it's the last time she saw Rendell, he was at college, and him and Nina, and it's like, she was like, yeah, like, he told me about you. She's like, right, I didn't know she's like, it was like a Labor Day weekend. He was at college. He came back home. And I guess that's what potentially set Aaron to that point where she ended up doing the whole head key thing. Like, once again, like, what was a motivator? Like, maybe at that point, her and Rendell split up, or whatever the case may be. That was like one of the last times she saw. Well, that might have not have been the last time, because I'm correlating, like, that Labor Day weekend with the last time she said, like, Rendell's goodbye, so that, because she did say it was like the last time she saw him, I think, in both cases. So maybe that's what sent her down, wanting to go to Key House and remember being a spot that reminded her of him, and then wanted to go down memory lane with the head key. I don't know. Maybe think about happier times, because they still had to, because the whole point of, like, them remembering magic wasn't just to remember magic. It was also so they could remember what they did. They, you know, the whole Lucas situation, as well as, like, faking the deaths of their other friends to make it seem like, oh, like, they got caught in tides or whatever and drowned. All that, like, remember what they did in their parts to play, and that's kind of what that came down to. So, but you have Kinsey at that party, and she runs into Scott, and she's kind of awkward around Scott just because of, like, their fights and everything. But also, once again, at the time, she found out, like, right, Scott didn't get into the school. So, because Abby was like, oh, maybe he has enough time to make up with Scott. I mean, Scott has enough time to make it up with him and Gabe, as well as you. And I think because of that, like, she started feeling even worse, because, once again, she defended Gabe, now finding out Scott didn't get into the school he was kind of hoping for, he had his heart set on. And just kind of feeling bad and everything, because now I think she kind of came to the same conclusion I did, that when she threw that in his face, like, oh, you should just go to that Rochester school, by then he probably found out he didn't get in. But it's also, the thing is, we're not in a good enough place, whether that's the case or not. At the very least, it's upsetting to know, like, right, he didn't get in and he didn't confide in me. Like, he would have told me something. Like, that was the first person he told about the school. I'm the last person to know that he didn't get in, potentially, you know, so. But obviously, she starts picking up on the whole Gabe thing. I think now that her fear is back, she's starting to realize and recognize, like, yeah, there are, because she even talked to her mom about it. Like, how do I know, like, a lot of the, because she's been second guessing a lot of the choices that she's been making lately. She was kind of second guessing them even before she put her fear back in, but I think even more so now. And, you know, an overthinker. That's what Nina described Kinsey as in the first season, and it's like, yeah, it seems like it still reigns true, because she's like, yeah, you got that from your dad. So at the end of the day, you just have to trust your gut. And, like, this whole Gabe thing is starting to seem suspicious, especially because he's spending so much time around Eden and her being so, like, weird and secretive. And even at one point, like, Gabe tried to reach for her hand, and she kind of pulls back, and she's like, oh, it's just shock, but it's like, it was something more, because of the fear of her being like, there's a part of me, she, like, in that moment was scared, because she was like, right, I don't know if I fully trust you, like I did wholeheartedly before. I'm scared now, so. Which, God, there's so many moving pieces. So aside from all that, we had Tyler's situation, him and Jackie. He wanted to surprise Jackie for her birthday, so it's like, cool, look here in this book, and they end up going to Bath in England. And that's it's like, oh, this Jane Austen tour. It's like, yeah, it's like a bit, it's like, oh, the book was just, oh, this is my gift, which is like immediately just because I just think of it. It's like when Rick Glassman gives people the Justin Timberlake book on the Take Your Shoes Off, his podcast. It just makes me think of that a little bit, like, oh, because most people are like, cool, thanks. Especially like my favorite reaction is probably from like Esther being like, what? Probably Jackie too being like, what? Why'd you give me this? Like, you're a big Justin Timberlake fan. I mean, yeah, like, it's just, regardless, it made me think of that. I've been watching his podcast a lot more recently, so, like, that's why that particular reference came to mind. It means nothing to you if you've never seen which I'm not trying to, like, oh, you've never watched or listened to, it's like, nothing like that. It's just like, yeah, it's a reference that anyone listening to this might not get, but it reminded me of that a little bit, like her initial reaction, like, oh, cool, no, I love the book, But yeah, they're in England. I'm like, yeah, there's probably going to be. I was almost halfway expecting the moment they go through the door and end up in England, then like the memory would happen. But it's not till later on. They spent time there to have fun. But then like she got overwhelmed and scared. And Tyler had to take her home. And she's like, remembers like, wait, this isn't the first time it's happening. He's like, no, it's going to keep happening. Obviously, the closer we get to your 18th birthday. And she's like, he's like, yeah, I can only guess how you. I guess, I understand how you feel. And she's like, no, you don't. Like, how scary it is because, like, it's so overwhelming because, once again, everything tied to the keys disappears. So, like, you'll have a massive blanks because so much of her interactions with Tyler and everything, like, she knows Tyler. And so, like, it creates a lot of blank spots in their relationship. And because, like, once again, that's played a part in their relationship. And it ultimately helped, like, the truth of that coming out eventually led them together. And now it's like, wait. Now it's scary. She doesn't want to have anything to do with the keys anymore just because of how scary it is, how hard that is. I mean, Duncan's going through his own version of it right now, but Tyler's just like, let me tell you about, like, let me just find a way to get to the memory. Just give me a little bit more time to fix this because sadly, because if not, like, if for Tyler, I think it's also, like, not only holding on to Jackie, but also, like, right, if I don't do this, that's going to be me eventually, and I'm going to be like that with my siblings, and I'm like, I don't want that to happen. It's like, the wonderful things that this magic has brought to their lives, but also, it creates a situation where, you don't want to see the person you're in love with, like, scared and panicked like that. Like I referenced before, like the 51st date type of thing of like them being confused about what's going on. Even with the video making, it doesn't make that any easier. It just makes it even more scary. Like, right, like I can be fine 1 minute and then just the next, everything's blank. And if I don't know what's going on, like just what that can do to someone, that's scary to think about. And just Tyler just wants to try and hold on to Jackie and just like what they share together. So it's a complicated situation to be in. Erin did go into her own head, and I think this speaks volumes that the Erin that came out this time, like, of her mind is her adult side. Like, obviously, like, her mind was trapped as, like, that teenager, and now she's like, but now when she uses a head key, she's an adult again. I think that's interesting, a little interesting detail. But she went in there and found, like, Rendell's goodbye to her, and it turns out he hid the key somewhere in Matheson Academy, so it's at least somewhere to start. So there's that angle to it. Gabe, being the mischievous bastard that he is, found a way to, like, trick Bodhi into giving him the ghost key. So he goes and he meets with Chamberlain, and it's like, oh, Chamberlain's like, oh, I know who you are. I was like, yo, he's like, they can't see you for who you are, but I can. I was like, whoa, is it a ghost thing that, like, does it reveal something? What it is? He's like, oh, I see that thing on your spine. I'm like, yo, I'm like, so that's what, does that, because I can only assume it doesn't look like that on your body, but I guess, like, the demons, they latch onto your soul. So, but because, like, you are just a spirit, you are leaving your body behind, like, this thing is attached to your soul, essentially. So, the moment he saw Gabe fly away before, or at least, like, he saw it, but, like, Gabe didn't know, like, oh, that was I was like, dude, that's why Chamberlain set him up. And it also explains, like, because before I was like, what went wrong? Like, why did this time it blow up? And it's like, because they added their blood. Only the Locks can make keys. So that means Duncan, Kinsey, Tyler, and Bodhi are the only ones who are left that can make keys. No one else can. And the moment Ida's demon blood was added to it, that's what set it off. Because last time, yeah, they made a key, but that's because they didn't add blood. Like, someone other than a Locke's blood. I wonder, it had that volatile reaction because it was demons that did it. Now, if it was a regular human would it be an issue? Like if it were like Scott, for example, if Scott made a key like and added his own blood, would it be an issue? Would it have that same explosive reaction, or was that just because Eden's, possessed by one of these things? So, and I love that twist where it's like, oh yeah, you're not a friend of ours, you're not one of us, so you'll never be able to make the key. And then like Sam rushes out. I'm like, Sam! I was like, whoa! Because he's trying to make up for the past. Because I recently rewatched season 1, I was trying to remember what had happened to Sam, and at the end of the episode, he just disappeared. So I was like, did he move on? I mean, his body's dead, so there's no coming back for him. I don't even know if they could get his body there. Like it's too late. Like maybe this connection to his body was severed the moment that happened. Whatever the case may be, because they're like, right, the point is to always keep the door open while you're using the ghost key, because I guess it immediately severs it. You can apparently jump into any other body that's maybe available at the time, or just but you won't be able to get back to your own body. Maybe like that connection's forever severed. But Sam and him are racing, and they're split between the two bodies. And like Sam's adamant, he's like, right, you're not going to hurt anyone again, because like, despite everything, that demon is the one that manipulated him into hurting Rendell and all this stuff. It played into his fears and his insecurities, like she does with everyone else. Like that thing is very good at manipulating people. But sadly, like Sam got booted out of the body, and Gabe kind of walked away the winner. I guess Bodhi didn't think much of it, but it's like he did walk away with the ghost key. Now, I thought Bodhi, when he was talking to Kinsey earlier about at a later point about the whole controlling her fear, like even though it's outside of her mind, I thought he was going to reference like, oh yeah, like how to go with the finding a place for the movie. She's like, what are you talking about? Well, Gabe stopped by to use the ghost key. Wait, he did? Like I thought that was going to happen. It never did. But maybe those inconsistencies will come up later on, because Gabe makes some excuse like, oh yeah, I stayed inside my room. I didn't study what was needed. So there was that. But also, so I thought the inconsistency would like come up later on. It still could, but it's like, why did Gabe lie about that? But also, like, Bodhi would be, not unless he did give the key back to Bodhi. I don't think he did. I think he took the ghost key and bounced. And I just think Bodhi was so concerned about Duncan that he didn't think much of it, because at that point Duncan had gone outside to that shed, and that's where he made the memory key, and that's also where they took his memories out. And just like, once again, he's like, they did something. He's like, why did they do that to me? But he just, once again, can't click it all together. So that's all fascinating. Obviously, Kinsey not having as much of an issue with her mom and Josh being a thing. She said, like, at first she thought that's what was bothering her, but she's like, no, you guys look cute together. She's like, if you're happy, Mom, I'm happy. And I was like, that's dope, because she was worried like that's what was bothering Kinsey, because Kinsey caught Josh giving her a kiss on the cheek. But I like that. It's like, yeah, like they understand, like, as long as I'm granted, we don't know how Bodhi and Tyler feel about it, but Kinsey's okay with it, so maybe they're okay with it too. We'll have to wait and see. But what was interesting, we do find out once again, they keep playing it up of like, yeah, Josh has a family connection to Matheson, and so Doug ended up picking up a rock and was like, freaking, all right, there's another piece of metal. There's the other another whispering metal. So it was found by his ancestor's body or something like that. So whether it was the last dude or one of the other two dudes, like, because his ancestor was like a British soldier, and it's like it was found next to his journal. So Gabe finds out about it and grabs it, and he's like, cool, now I don't have to hurt you. And Eden's like, what are you talking about? It's like, well, if I couldn't find another one, I was going to use your whispering evil. I was like, that's fascinating, because he was like going to basically take it out of her. And I'm curious, would that have killed Eden? Definitely would have killed the thing inside her. I was like, how do you actually remove that? I guess it would have meant like, maybe it is, well, because it is attached to the spine. I brought that up earlier. Like, oh, maybe it's attached to the soul. It's like, no, it is attached to the spine, so it's going to be beneath the skin. So you probably have to rip out her back and like rip it off of her spine to use it. It's probably how that would happen. So I just thought about it, because I was like, right, because I was like, would you see that like underneath? It's like, no, like to see it, you'd have to expose a person's spine, because it's not just attached to their soul. It carries over with the spirit situation from the ghost key. That carries over, but that's because this thing is kind of a supernatural, magical thing, so that's why it still latches onto you no matter what. But it is like attached to your spine, so of course you wouldn't see that or know that. So just some clarification for something earlier. that's so interesting to know that he was considering that. Eden's like, what? And he's like, don't worry, I don't have to do it anymore now that we have another piece. So I am curious, like, why they did keep Kenzie's fear. Like, was it going to be like, right, we need to find the key, and then, like, whatever key they're trying to make, they were going to test it on Kenzie. So, once again, like, I guess it's, like, maybe they were thinking, like, if they could control her fear, they could control Kenzie to do whatever they need to, whether it's open the Omega door, once again, to make more whispering metals come through so they could use those, or whether it's just to let more of their brethren possess human body. Once again, we don't really know. I am curious, can a Locke get possessed? We see like the demon's circumstances connected to the Locks, but could it work? Like, could Kenzie, Bodhi, or even Duncan get possessed? And would it be this? I mean, that's probably what they're probably hoping for, is to like possess a Locke's body. That way, you have access to the keys. I wonder, would it make it so that you could never use one of the keys again because you're in a Locke's body, and it creates this like weird, like, this weird, what's the word I'm looking for? I can't think of the word I'm looking for, but basically it would break the rules. It'd be kind of a loophole, but it'd be like a weird one that kind of breaks the rules and it makes it impossible to use again. Like, I'm sure we're going to probably find out those answers, because I'm sure that's going to happen at some point during the season, maybe even near the end of the season. We'll see. Maybe they were just, like I said, going to test it out on her, but now her fear is gone, and now they know it's potentially back in her head now. So what does that mean going forward? Well, because also now that they know they need a Locke's blood, they're probably hoping now, like, oh, at the very least, her fear is still Kenzie, so if they could use it to make a key, they would probably just need to, like, add her blood to it. But it still has to be based on her intentions of the key, I'm assuming. So maybe it all kind of fits together, but it definitely put a dent in their plan. So sets up a lot of interesting stuff. I'm really curious to ultimately see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.